Claire Evans thought she had found comfort in Adrian, the mysterious man who filled the emptiness her husband Daniel left behind. But she never imagined he would be the very one responsible for Daniel's murder. Claire Evans had built her life around routine. She woke early, packed her husband's lunch, drove their children to school, and worked her quiet shift at a local library. From the outside, her world seemed stable, even enviable. Yet inside, she felt invisible. Her husband, Daniel, was a dedicated accountant who often came home long after dinner had grown cold. He wasn't unkind, but his energy was consumed by spreadsheets, late-night calls, and endless overtime. Their conversations had dwindled to polite reminders about bills and chores. The warmth that once bound them together had faded into a dull pattern of silence. Claire often found herself staring out of windows, imagining a different life. She scrolled through social media late into the night, envying others' happiness. At first, she told herself she was content, that her longing for excitement was just a phase. But as the months passed, her loneliness deepened, pressing down on her like a heavy fog. She felt as though she were disappearing, her identity reduced to wife, mother, and caretaker, with no space left for her own desires. One restless evening, searching for distraction, she stumbled across an online chat forum. It was simple, filled with strangers discussing books, music, and everyday struggles. Claire hesitated before creating a profile. She told herself it was harmless, just a place to pass time when the nights grew too quiet. Yet the moment she began reading the messages, she felt a spark of connection. For the first time in years, someone might notice her again. She had no way of knowing that this small decision, typing her name into a faceless website, would draw her into a web far darker than the loneliness she was trying to escape. In the days that followed, Claire kept returning to the chat forum. Among the casual exchanges about films and hobbies, one username kept catching her eye, Adrian. His words seemed carefully chosen, thoughtful in a way that felt rare. While others made small jokes or quick remarks, Adrian asked questions that felt personal without being intrusive. He wanted to know what books she loved, what dreams she once had, and what places she longed to see. Claire, who had grown used to being overlooked at home, felt an unfamiliar warmth each time she read his replies. Soon, their messages grew longer. What began as small talk about music turned into confessions about sleepless nights and hidden frustrations. Adrian shared stories of traveling across Europe, describing hotels, airports, and glittering city lights. He painted a picture of freedom and success that made Claire's life feel small in comparison. His world seemed filled with adventure, while hers was tied to laundry baskets and schedules. She never questioned the truth of his tales. She wanted to believe them. Adrian sent compliments that made her cheeks flush, telling her she was intelligent, graceful, and deserving of more than a life of silence. Each message pulled her further from the reality of her marriage. She began to wait eagerly for the sound of notifications, her heart racing in anticipation of his words. What started as harmless distraction slowly turned into something secret and addictive. Claire began closing her laptop quickly whenever Daniel walked into the room. The guilt of hiding grew, but so did her excitement. In her mind, Adrian was not just another stranger online. He was becoming the person who made her feel alive again. As the weeks passed, Claire's double life began to shape her moods. At home, she was restless and distracted, no longer able to hide the change Daniel noticed in her. He asked simple questions: why she was awake so late, why she seemed distant at breakfast, but she brushed them off with vague excuses. Their home, once filled with quiet but steady companionship, started to feel tense, like a place she was only passing through. Every argument seemed sharper, every silence longer. Daniel interpreted her withdrawal as unhappiness with his long hours, and though he tried to adjust, the gap between them only widened. Claire poured her secrets into her nightly conversations with Adrian. She told him about her frustrations with Daniel, how she felt trapped in a marriage that had become suffocating. Adrian listened with the kind of patience Daniel no longer had. His replies seemed perfectly tailored to her thoughts, as if he had been waiting for someone like her to appear. He told her that no one should live in a cage built by duty, that life was too short to waste on unhappiness. For Claire, his words struck a dangerous chord. They stirred something in her, a mixture of longing and resentment. She began to compare her husband to the man behind the screen, noticing every flaw in Daniel more harshly than before. The smallest disagreements now felt unbearable. In her mind, Adrian became the standard by which Daniel failed. Late one evening, after venting about another fight at home, Claire received a reply that unsettled her. Adrian told her that obstacles could always be removed. He left the statement hanging, offering no explanation, but the weight of his words lingered long after she shut her laptop. Winter arrived quietly, and with it came a night that would change Claire's life forever. Daniel had gone out to run errands, something ordinary and routine. Hours later, a neighbor noticed his car still parked in the driveway, but the garage door open. Inside, Daniel's body was found lying motionless on the cold concrete. His head bore a deep wound, and a pool of blood had spread beneath him. The scene was grim, yet investigators quickly labeled it a tragic accident. They believed he had slipped while carrying tools, struck his head, and died alone. News of Daniel's death spread quickly through the small community. Friends and neighbors brought flowers and casseroles, offering kind words about his hard work and steady character. Claire wept in front of them, her tears falling easily, though the emotions underneath were more complex than anyone realized. She felt grief, yes, but threaded through it was a quiet sense of release. The life that had grown heavy with silence and frustration was gone in an instant, replaced by a hollow space she could not yet define. In the days that followed, Claire moved carefully through the rituals of mourning, funeral arrangements, condolences, endless paperwork. Outwardly, she played the role of grieving widow, but in private she clung to the one connection that gave her comfort. Adrian's messages arrived daily, filled with sympathy and reassurance. He told her she was strong, that this painful ending could also be a new beginning. Instead of questioning the strange timing of Daniel's sudden death, Claire allowed herself to believe in coincidence. She didn't notice the unease growing inside her each time Adrian wrote, as though he had been closer to the scene than she ever described. In the weeks after Daniel's funeral, Claire leaned more heavily on her secret connection. Adrian's messages became her lifeline, a reminder that she was not alone. When he suggested they finally meet face-to-face, Claire felt both nervous and thrilled. The thought of stepping beyond the glow of a computer screen into the reality of his presence filled her with anticipation. She imagined dinners, walks, and the start of a new life, free from the shadows of her past. But the day they planned to meet came and went without Adrian appearing. Claire sat in a cafe for hours, scanning every face that walked through the door, her nerves fraying with each passing minute. Eventually she left, embarrassed and unsettled. That evening, a message from Adrian arrived. He apologized briefly, but then shifted the conversation in a darker direction. He reminded her of the night she had confessed her unhappiness, the night she said her husband stood in the way of her happiness. His words implied that he had listened too carefully, taken her frustrations as something more than venting. The tone unsettled her. Adrian began to reference details about Daniel's death that had never been published, details about the way his body was found, the exact location of his injury, even the broken tools scattered in the garage. Claire froze each time she read his words, her heart racing with unease. What had once felt like affection now carried a sharp edge. The charm that drew her in was slipping, replaced by a cold confidence that made her skin crawl. She tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but the creeping suspicion settled deeper with every message. Adrian knew too much. Claire could no longer ignore the gnawing unease in her stomach. Each time Adrian sent a message, she reread it with suspicion, searching for signs of deception. His charm was still present, but beneath it she now saw cracks. He often contradicted himself, telling one story one week and another the next. One evening he claimed to be in Paris, but a photograph he sent had landmarks from Madrid. Claire brushed it off at first, but the mistakes piled up until they could no longer be dismissed as slips. Driven by curiosity and fear, she began combing through his old emails and stored chats. Small inconsistencies leapt out, flight times that didn't match, places he described that contained errors anyone who had truly been there wouldn't make. When she reverse-searched one of his profile pictures, her stomach dropped. The image belonged to a stock photo site. Adrian's confident smile and polished appearance weren't his at all. Claire's investigation deepened. She searched news reports and stumbled upon troubling coincidences. Several of the cities Adrian claimed to have visited had unsolved crimes involving sudden accidents or mysterious deaths. Each time, the victims were men, and the timelines aligned disturbingly close to Adrian's supposed travels. The realization struck hard. Adrian wasn't just a liar. He was dangerous. And if his stories of success and travel were fake, then who had she really been speaking to all these months? Worse still, why did he know so much about Daniel's death? What had begun as an escape from loneliness was unraveling into a nightmare. Every new discovery drew Claire closer to a terrifying truth, yet she still couldn't bring herself to cut ties completely. Fear and fascination held her trapped. One evening, as dusk fell across the quiet neighborhood, Claire opened her front door to find a small package resting on the porch. There was no return address, only her name scrawled across the top in uneven handwriting. With trembling hands, she carried it inside and set it on the kitchen table. For long minutes she stared at it, her breath shallow, before finally tearing the tape. Inside, cushioned by brown paper, lay Daniel's wristwatch. The sight of it sent a chill down her spine. It was the same watch he had worn every day, the one missing since the night of his death. Police had marked it as misplaced, perhaps lost during the accident, but here it was, delivered directly to her. Alongside it was a folded slip of paper, no more than a few words written in sharp ink. "Now you're truly mine." Claire's legs buckled, and she dropped into a chair. Her mind raced. The only person who could have taken that watch was the same person who had been in the garage the night Daniel died. Adrian had not been a distant comfort on the other side of a glowing screen. He had been here, in her home, watching, moving through the spaces she thought were safe. Memories flooded back. His cryptic comments, his unsettling knowledge of details never made public, his sudden silence when she asked direct questions. Everything pointed to one horrifying truth. Adrian had murdered Daniel. The room seemed to close in around her as the weight of the realization pressed down. She had invited a stranger into her life, confided her darkest frustrations, and in doing so had unknowingly opened the door to a killer. Claire knew she could no longer remain silent. The watch, the note, the details Adrian had shared, all of it painted a picture too clear to ignore. She gathered every email, every message, and every strange inconsistency she had discovered. Fear gnawed at her, but she forced herself to walk into the local police station with the package clutched tightly in her hands. Investigators who had once ruled Daniel's death an accident now studied the evidence with grim focus. The watch alone shattered their earlier conclusions, proving that someone had staged the scene. With Claire's digital trail of messages, they began to trace Adrian's accounts. What they uncovered was worse than she imagined. Adrian was not a businessman at all, but a drifter with a history of violence. He had created multiple identities online, each one crafted to lure lonely women into trusting him. His pattern was chilling: gain their confidence, eliminate their partners, and disappear before suspicion could settle. For months he had moved undetected, leaving broken families behind him. Claire had been another target, carefully chosen and manipulated. But unlike others before her, she had lived to uncover the truth. As police reopened Daniel's case and issued warrants, Adrian vanished. His accounts went dark, and his trail dissolved into nothing. Still, the evidence was strong enough to keep the investigation alive, with authorities convinced he would surface again. Claire was left with the bitter weight of survival. What she once believed was love had been nothing more than a trap. She had been seduced by words on a screen, only to discover the man behind them was a killer. The nightmare left her with a single haunting lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one you invite into your life.